meeting? I feel like I saw you on a coworker's computer.
I was at walk-ons for a couple hours.
Oh, okay, never mind. It wasn't you. I just thought I remembered your office space, so I thought maybe that was Andy.
No.
Walk-ons is the like Drew Brees has one, right?
Yeah, he's a co-owner.
Oh, he owns
I
all.
was meeting there yesterday afternoon. Walk-ons started with 2 former LSU basketball players who were walk-ons for the team. They opened a restaurant in Baton Rouge, and then 25 years later started franchising it. They called it Walk-ons, and then they got Drew Brees, and I think there's somebody on one of the Pelicans players is an investor too.
Is that with Dak Prescott?
They got Drew Brees, and
I think that's what he got into. Is that a good spot?
Yeah, I like their food. It's not cheap, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good sports bar food, and it's a lot healthier than most sports bar foods.
Oh, that's good. Good morning, Sam. Morning, everyone.
Okay.
Welcome in. Welcome in. It is a Friday morning on the Chris Duel show. Chris Duel out today. He's having a little balloon something or other for his nose or for his sinuses or something. It's going to make him feel better regardless. But today he's having that done. He's actually in Austin. So I myself in Austin at the iHeart Austin Studios on South Congress. And joining me today is Mr. Andy Everett. Andy, how are you this morning? It's all right. It's going well up here in the 512, and running the board back in SA is Mr. Sam Freeze, who is behind the scenes taking care of all of the things that need to be taken care of when working that radio lifestyle. We are streaming as always on the iHeartRadio app, AM 1300 Zone and Ticket 760, and via video. If you want to check us out, see what we're wearing today, see what we're up to, see if I brush my hair or not, that kind of thing. We are on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch as well. Twitch for the kids. We do it for the kids. And Andy, I'm so glad you're joining us today because there's a lot of news in the golf world, both professionally and within the NCAA. We just had the NFL schedule release. Excited for your take on that. This whole notion that should San Antonio and Austin team up for a bid at getting the Oakland A's to maybe become the San Antonio Austin A's, whatever we want to call it. And then the Spurs, they clinched their play-in spot last night, but they didn't really do it themselves. They got some help after the Kings lost their match because the Spurs blew a 17-point lead to the Knicks last night to end up losing that one in New York. They now face the Suns both Saturday and Sunday. Those game times have been set. I know yesterday Chris was stressing. We didn't know the game times. The game times are now 1 o'clock, both Saturday and Sunday, which means Spurs fans, you can watch that Saturday game and then flip over to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony with Tim Duncan at 6:30. But Andy, they have clinched that play-in spot. It looks like they're going to be playing Memphis. But what are your thoughts on this team and how far do you think they'll go? I mean, is it even worth it to try? What are your thoughts on the Spurs as we see them heading to this part? I like that analogy in NBA purgatory. And that kind of takes us to our poll question today. We're asking fans of the NBA and the Spurs to keep it real, keep it realistic, and asking how far you think they'll go in this play-in and playoff scenario. Most people right now saying they're out after the play-in, so maybe not even beating the Grizzlies. 15% saying first round or better, and 7% saying conference finals or finals. So that's, I don't know, maybe a little optimistic at this point, and how that 17 point lead was blown last night. But okay, that's fair. I mean, if you're going to be a fan, might as well go all the way. But it sounds like you, Andy, feel like they could see an early exit, maybe not even make it into the actual playoffs, but potentially lose here to Memphis. Yeah, that's something we talked about prior to the season, like really getting going, was that the Spurs were making it a point to shoot more threes and then obviously make more threes. And they've come a long way from where they used to be, but they're still not where the rest of the NBA is. And I think until they get a guy who can consistently knock those down, they're going to suffer. And unfortunately, they took an L last night. Of course, they play the Suns twice coming up this weekend, and the Suns still fighting for that number one spot in the West. So I don't think it'll be an easy one for the Spurs, but the Spurs now knowing that they've got that play-in spot clinched, I don't know that they'll throw everything into it that they have as the Suns look to hopefully jump over the Jazz. They're half game behind the Jazz. And then interesting, that number 5, 6, and 7 slot currently held by the Mavericks, Blazers, and Lakers. Still some toss up in there. There's still a play-in spot that needs to be clinched there. Of course, the Lakers and LeBron hoping they don't have to play in it. LeBron recently voicing his concerns about the play-in. Interesting that he's only feeling that way now that the Lakers are a threat to get it. Yeah, and the Lakers, as you mentioned, they started off pretty hot with AD and LeBron, and it looked more likely that they could possibly repeat. Now it just seems a little comical. Of course, they released their banner finally for that 2020 championship in front of some fans earlier this week. LeBron said the back-to-back run starts shortly. A little comical now when thinking about it. All right, we do this 12 times a day on Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone. It's your shot to win $1,000, and this is how you do it. Check it out. pretty good word as the Spurs look forward to playing the Suns to finish out the regular season this year. Andy Everett joining me today on the Chris Duel Show, and he, of course, is our resident golf guru. So I wanted to get your take on this. This happened, I think, Wednesday, when the NCAA announced that the women's regional tournament, the course was playable, but it wasn't championship level playable, so it was canceled. I don't know that I've ever heard of something more ridiculous. You being the proficient golfer, know a few things about courses and their playability. What was the situation in which it could be deemed playable but not championship playable? I guess my question to you then would be, a lot of the players are really disappointed. Some even posted photos that the field conditions were better than they were even the day before, and they felt it was playable for them. I mean, it's a huge tournament. It's an opportunity for them to show off their skills at one of the highest levels in their collegiate career, and I can understand their disappointment. They all get to move on because this tournament was canceled, but I mean, if they wanted to play, what were your thoughts on that? talking golf in the NCAA with Andy Everett. We'll get his thoughts on the PGA later today. Jordan Spieth hitting quite the shot from distance. We'll get his thoughts on that, as well as the upcoming championship that we've got just around the corner. Coming up next, we'll do the high five play of the day. This is for an off-court play. Don't know if you've heard about this one. We'll get you keyed into that. So much more coming up. Paul Alexander will join us today at 7. James Allen at 8 o'clock. So stay tuned. It is the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone.
Good morning, everyone. We're having some audio issues on the screen.
I'm not seeing any comments. Well, maybe I need to switch this. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now I am. What's wrong with my frame?
I don't know.
Is he talking about
Me.
the picture behind me or the?
Hey, Sam, do we have more audio ready?
What's that? Well, it's right to me.
Look good. Yeah, Tracy, Spurs are no strangers to giving up big leads.
That's what happens when you can't match threes. It's amazing how quickly teams can come back when they get hot from three-point land. On sports opinions question, can the city of San Antonio support a mediocre Spurs team for the next 10 years? They can. The question is whether they will. We've supported them for 45 or whatever it is. You can always support a team if you care, but
yeah, I don't think the city's not caring.
When you win 5 NBA championships and then you start to lose, sometimes people lose their interest because they're spoiled.
Just think about it. You could be the Kings, who haven't been in the playoffs in now 15 years.
Yeah.
You're doing just fine.
But I think Sacramento is a perfect example of what San Antonio could become, because this crop of players hasn't chosen to stay in Sacramento. If you look at the players Sacramento had when they were in the playoffs, they had Robert Horry, they had Vlade Divac, they had Mike Bibby, they had Peja Stojakovic. They had really good players, and there may not have been one superstar on that team, but they had a collection of almost superstars that at least were competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good sports city from a basketball standpoint. They supported the Kings and they supported the WNBA team, because I called 8 or 10 games from Arco Arena, and that place was packed every time we went in there. When the Spurs were making their first playoff runs in the late 90s, and even before the second championship in 03, if we had tickets to give to clients or to people at the radio station, they were gobbled up in 2 minutes. But by 2005 and 2007, and certainly 2014, people say, nah, it's only the first round. So wake me up when they get to the finals. Like, yeah, I'll go to the conference finals, but I really want to go. It's not important. And it was like the flipping a switch. And that's just how ridiculously spoiled they got after a couple of championships. They expected it all the time.
Barstool Show. Ticket 760, AM 1300 The Zone. Shannon Salty Sweeney with Andy Everett today. Talking some Spurs, talking some golf. We're going to keep it with the NBA here, Andy, for our High Five play of the day. Brought to you by High Five, two Austin area locations, one on Anderson Lane, one out in Lakeway. It's going to be a great weekend to get out to High Five. We've got Austin FC at 2:30 tomorrow, so check them out at a High Five location near you. They are an official Austin FC pub club. And then you've got Sippin' Sundays. $15 craft pitchers, $12 domestic pitchers, and a $5 12-inch one-topping pizza is a great way to spend your weekend. All right, Andy, today's High Five play of the day, it's going to be a shout-out to Shaq, all right, because he's the ultimate teammate.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not when he was playing with Kobe, but in his post-NBA career, he's doing just fine for his guys on the TNT broadcast. During last night's show, they cut to break, and then our man Chuck, he was cramping up. I don't know how you cramp up that badly while sitting there doing your desk job. But either way, his hammy was cramping up. He had a problem, and it was Shaq to the rescue. We've got a little clip of that here for you. I mean, by the time Chuck got up to start stretching out his hammy, Shaq was over there helping him massage it, make it feel better so they could get back to broadcasting, because that's what they do. They're always the professionals over on that set, Andy. Chris and I talk about them a lot because they're just entertaining, right? They're probably the best part of the NBA when it's not the playoffs.
That may be the best studio show that's ever been done in any sport. The camaraderie that they have, and the captain of the ship is Ernie Johnson, and he knows exactly where to direct it. But I can feel for Charles Barkley, because when I broadcast games, I try to be very judicious in how much I drink, and I try to find things that I drink a lot of water normally, but I don't drink a lot of water during games because I can't leave. I can't get up and go anywhere. And I have been in that situation where midway through a game, I'll cramp up and it hurts. And there's nowhere you can go. You just have to kind of lean back in the chair and stretch. And the other thing that it's interesting too about that is a lot of the basketball arenas in the NBA, and when I did games for the Stars in the WNBA, especially in September, the court is on top of the ice hockey rink. Like in the Staples Center, there's ice on the floor as soon as September rolls around because the Kings are in their preseason, and they put the court on top of it for the WNBA game. And you could set a soft drink or whatever you're drinking on the floor, and it would stay cold the entire game. But as the game goes on, your toes start to get numb, and then your legs get numb, and it goes all the way up to your knee. And you're sitting there trying to rub out, the numbness because you're sitting on a block of ice for 3 hours. I can feel for Chuck because I've had that happen before.
That is fantastic about the court. I never knew that. I think I'd be just flat out miserable being in that situation. But also, you being the professional broadcaster you are, that is some great insight, because although I know Chuck is obviously super into his job and wants to be professional at all times, I don't see him as the guy who isn't afraid to just get up and walk off the set if he did have to go to the bathroom. He's probably like, there's other guys here.
Well, they do it in spurts. They have breaks. A football game has a halftime, and that's about it. And a basketball game has a halftime, and that's about it.
Right. But
I'm by myself for basketball most of the time.
I love this for Shaq for doing that. I just wish, I think he could have upped it just a little bit. I'm still going to give him a high five, but I would have given him a bigger high five had he had whipped out his Icy Hot and said, "Here, Chuck."
Yeah, that would have been good.
That would have been fantastic branding. I don't know if he still has that deal. I just feel like those commercials in his son's uniform ran way too long.
I read
past his playing time.
I read this story about Shaq a few months ago, and I don't remember the gist of it completely, but basically he was in a jewelry store, and a couple was picking out an engagement ring, and they were trying to figure out which one they should get. And the guy said, well, let's go with the more expensive one. And Shaq walked over and paid for it in cash. Well, he just handed the guy his credit card and said, put that on me. So, that's pretty cool when somebody does that for somebody.
Yeah. And they did talk about that actually on the show. And he even said, I kind of do stuff like that a lot because I'm in this position where I can. I don't go out and then share it with the world. It just so happened that a gentleman was there and saw it and took out his camera and filmed it. And okay, that's understandable. It's hard. You can't not notice Shaq.
Right.
Right. And I think Shaq said he was there. He was buying himself some hoop earrings, which I love that too, that he's still in the jewelry game, even though he's taken on this broadcaster role.
I'll give you an example of you can't miss Shaq. Back in the years when the Spurs were playing in the Alamo Dome, I was covering the locker room and waiting for. I'm thinking Shaq may have been still with Orlando, first year with the Lakers, somewhere around in there, and so I've got to. You kind of wait by their locker area until they get done, and he would go shower and change his clothes and put on his suit and all that, kind of in a back room somewhere, and then he would walk out. And I had my back to that area of the locker room, and all of a sudden, I just feel this wake coming through the building, and I turn around, and then Shaq is like hovering right over the top of me. And he's television does not do justice as to how big and to how, you create a wake when you walk by something. He creates a Whitecaps basically, because it is just unbelievable how huge and how strong he is and was. So you're not missing him. When he comes in the room, the presence is there immediately.
I love when he and Kevin Hart are next to each other because it really shows how short Kevin is, but then also just how tall Shaq is. And Shaq, I don't think when he was in his playing days that I would have pictured him being on a studio set and being a key player on TNT during playoffs and just talking basketball, because he was never much for talking. But I love it. I love that crew. I love that they're so friendly and that Shaq is willing to help out a fellow teammate in his time of need. So a huge high five to the big man himself, Shaq, on this day. All right, Andy, coming up in the 7 o'clock hour, we're going to be talking to Paul Alexander, who recently went back to the San Antonio area. So I'm sure he has some thoughts on whether or not the Oakland A's should maybe look into the San Antonio, Austin, Central Texas area to relocate. But you posted a question on your Facebook page earlier in the week about it, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it and what kind of reaction you received.
Well, the reaction is exactly what I thought it would be. And I get it. I understand the biggest hurdle that San Antonio has is corporate sponsorship. And I have always questioned this San Antonio-Austin alliance thing for professional teams. How far from San Antonio do you have to go? I mean, if you're going to do it in San Marcos or New Braunfels, is it really San Antonio or Austin's team? And do those communities have the infrastructure necessary for a professional team to be there? Because not only do you have to have a football arena or a baseball stadium there, but you have to have multiple hotels. You have to have a mixed use development that's going to take because basketball teams and football teams and baseball teams aren't going to drive 40 miles into a stadium, even if you're halfway between the two cities. And I've always questioned as well is how many sports fans in Austin consider themselves sports fans and not Longhorn fans. And I think the University of Texas dominates the sports market there. So for the sake of this argument, my thoughts were just about San Antonio. And the corporate support isn't here. But my question has always been, why isn't here? Because I can go back to 1988 when I first moved to Texas and to San Antonio, and we were discussing the merits of the Alamo Dome. And 35, 40 years later, there's people still saying the Alamo Dome was a waste of our time and money. And I'm like, are you not a sports fan? Do you not care about the all the things that have happened because of the Alamo Dome? And when you talk about building publicly funded stadiums, other than the fact that Steve Ballmer is paying for most of his because he's a multi-billionaire and can do whatever he wants and has enough money not to miss $2 or $3 billion, most stadiums are publicly funded. And there is a lot of use that the entire public gets, even if you're not a sports fan. But I got the typical response: we're not big enough. We don't have corporate support. The other cities are more important to us. And I look at the way that we've operated as a community. It's been good in some areas, and we've been lucky that the Spurs have won championships. But we did nothing to keep AT&T here, and we've done very few other things to keep other major corporations from considering here. I know 5 or 6 years ago there was talk about building this huge airport that would be international, and as soon as we said no to that, AT&T called the moving van and headed to Dallas. It's not going to happen. The other cities are way ahead of us in terms of desire and potential, and it's not the ownership, because the A's ownership would come. They would be the owners of the team in another city. They're not selling the team; they're just wanting to relocate it. But so they have enough money, and their money probably would go further in Texas than it would in California. But the point is that the corporate support should have been the growth of that should have been started 30 years ago, and it wasn't. And that's why San Antonio isn't really a viable choice for Major League Baseball or the NFL, because those businesses and those corporations were basically never really invited to come, because other cities had more to offer, and smaller cities than San Antonio at that.
I'm pretty much right there with you. I just don't see the infrastructure to house something like that. And like you mentioned, hotels and restaurants and everything in between. If you're going to place something, smack dab in the middle of Austin and San Antonio to create this almost, I guess you can almost say like the Cowboys, and that they play in Arlington and not really Dallas, but you think of everything that's been built around there just in the last 5-10 years to help people to go to those areas when there aren't games on Sundays.
Well, Jerry Jones had an advantage with the Metroplex when he said, "I want a new stadium." Irving, you going to do it? No. Grand Prairie, are you going to do it? No. Plano, are you going to do it? No. Frisco, are you going to do it? Maybe. Arlington, are you going to do it? Absolutely. So he had these municipalities that he could pit against one another. San Antonio, there's not enough population in New Braunfels or Bernie or wherever to do the same thing that he did there. That the city's made up differently, and so he could leverage one community after another, and he leveraged Frisco to be able to. That's where the Cowboys offices and stuff are when they move from the Star, and he leveraged Arlington because they wanted football right next to baseball, and they've been able to do that. And I can, if you live in Dallas proper or Trophy Club or wherever you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and you start driving, unless you actually know the lines of demarcation, you can't tell me when you've left one community and entered the other. San Antonio is different. When you've gotten to Selma, Shirts, New Braunfels, San Marcos, and Austin. So it's a little different layout.
Well, and I like the idea of the two coming together to propose something just to get conversations going and looking towards the future. But I don't believe the A's are going to be coming here anytime soon. But I think for the future, it's great to have that to then fall back on later to say, look, we've been putting this together for some time. I think of Nashville, who just a few years ago started putting stuff together with investors and celebrities and saying, we should have an MLB team here. We take on an expansion team. They've got renderings of a stadium that they'd put next to where the Titans play. I mean, they've already got everything pretty much drawn up and ready to go. They're just waiting for the opportunity. And so when something like this occurs where, we don't have to have an expansion team, which is going to cost billions and billions, we can possibly get a team that is just going to, relocate, and we'll put the money there. And, maybe you already have a small built-in fan base. And for Tennessee that doesn't already have an MLB team, I still look at, the Rangers and the Astros have kind of split the San Marcos, Austin area of who roots for who. And are you going to be able to pull those lifelong fans who maybe grew up in San Antonio and Austin who say, okay, well, I'm going to switch my allegiances here because now my hometown has a team?
Well, the night that the Alamo Dome was passed, I went to a party to celebrate the fact that we were going to get that the election had gone that way, and we were going to start the construction of the Alamo Dome. And I had no fewer than 5 or 6 people go, "I really hope we don't get the NFL." And I looked at them like, "Why?" And their answer was, because then I couldn't watch the Cowboys, and this would be a San Antonio football team market and not a Cowboy market. And I'm like, you would root for the Cowboys over your hometown team. And part of that Facebook thread I did the other day is a lot of the same thing was I root for the Rangers. I root for the Astros. I don't want another team. I'm like, well, that's not your team. You're piggybacking off of another community. And then the other part of that equation is the taxation part of it. And I travel a lot, and I didn't this past year with COVID, but normally I travel quite a bit with teams and golf vacations and stuff like that. And I've never been somewhere when I get an itemized bill that it doesn't say usage tax or stadium tax. And those taxes are on every car rental bill and on every hotel bill in every major city in the United States to create a fund to maintain or to build their football and their public use facilities. And there's so many people that will say, well, we're overtaxed as it is. Well, you're not paying for it unless you need to rent a car because yours is in the shop, or you and you decide to spend the weekend in a hotel. You're never paying for that. So when you go on vacation, you're paying for other people's stadiums. Turnabout's fair play. When they come here, they can pay for ours. But a lot of people just hear the word tax and they go, oh, we're not doing that. And then the leaders, those are the leaders that they choose. And the leaders don't ever bring it up because they know their constituents don't want to hear the word tax, even if somebody else is paying the tax.
Another great little nugget from Andy Everett. All right, the second hour of today's show is coming up. We were going to have Paul Alexander on. We will get his thoughts on the potential of an Austin-San Antonio alliance to bring a professional team, maybe the Oakland A's, to Central Texas, the NFL schedule, Tebow, and where we stand with the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. All of that coming up, as well as sports history, sports birthdays, and a salty shakedown at 7:30. Stick with us. It's the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone.
Right. Okay. Tracy, on your on there right now. Tracy, on your post, Peter Holt basically no longer runs the team. His kids do. If you didn't know that, I don't know what their worth is and how much money they have, but the Spurs he's not the sole owner. I think he owns 30, or the Holt family owns around 37% of the team. The other 63% is made up of individuals and companies in San Antonio. There's about 18 or 19 people that have a certain share that total the other 60+%. And it's never been about paying players because there is a salary cap, and there have been times where the Spurs have gone over it and paid luxury tax in some years. So it's not the fact that they're not willing to spend money. It's how do you keep people staying in San Antonio? There's a lot of young athletes want to live where there's more nightlife, I guess. Los Angeles, Miami, New York, places like that.
Morning. They always are, Louisa. Long breaks.
We have Paul. Thanks. Hour number 2 on the Chris Duel Show on a Friday. Shannon Salty Sweeney here, along with Andy Everett, as we are talking all things NBA, NFL, this weird thing going on with the Oakland A's. Could they be leaving? Could they possibly be heading to Central Texas? We're going to go ahead and get our man Paul Alexander's thoughts on that as he joins us like he always does at this time, 7 o'clock on Friday mornings. Good morning, Paul. How are you this morning?
I'm good. Long time.
So, Coach A, we were just talking about the Oakland A's and their potential move out of Oakland, and the idea that a lot of people are wanting Austin and San Antonio to combine their efforts to bring them to Central Texas. What are your thoughts on that as a Central Texan yourself? Do you think it's legit? Do you even think they could hold a team if they had one here, that they'd get the fan base? Or if not, where do you see them going if they do not stay in Oakland?
Paul, I put this on Facebook the other day when the story was coming out, and I got most of the responses that I thought I would. And the one that stands out the most to me, and the answer to this is accurate, that San Antonio does not have the corporate support for Major League Sports. They barely do to take care of the Spurs needs. And while I agree with that, there are smaller cities than San Antonio that are being looked at as potential sites for the A's if Oakland doesn't pony up with a new baseball stadium. But my question in this is, I've lived here now for 32 years, and every time San Antonio has been given the opportunity to do something that would attract more corporate support, there's always a reason why we can't do it instead of a reason why we do it. And a few years ago, there was this discussion about building this major international airport somewhere between here and San Marcos, so that it would attract more businesses. And as soon as that was put on the back burner, AT&T said, we're going to Dallas. And the biggest corporation that you would have to play with in a community like that would be a community supporter for endeavors like this was gone in 10 seconds. And I just don't know why we haven't done a better job of attracting major companies to come here through our infrastructure and our desire to expand. Agreed. Yes.
Coach A,
Agreed.
this Oakland story, clearly a headline throughout the week, but nonetheless, the NFL continues to dominate as they released their schedule this year. We found out that the Cowboys will open the year against the Bucks in Tampa, the same night that the Bucks will receive their banner and their rings all in front of their fans and celebrate that Super Bowl win. Your thoughts on this opening game for the Cowboys?
um, okay, I'll make your appetite a little wetter right here by telling you that we only have 112 days until college football season starts, and 5 days after that, the NFL starts. So I put the countdown on my phone as soon as UTSA's football season ended last year, and it's down to 112 days. Yes, I understand. And
Well,
I think that week is early November this year.
for those college players who did head to the NFL and took part in the NFL draft as well as undrafted free agency, a lot of them heading to rookie camps this week. And typically that would be the headline, right? All these guys coming in to get their shot to make that 53-man roster. It is the beginning for them. But Tim Tebow and this possibility that he will play for Jacksonville, how legit is that in your mind? Do you think he actually has a chance to make that 53-man roster? Is this just a ploy to bring up more hype for the Jacksonville Jaguars, even though they already seem to have so much going into this season?
Well, here's my feeling. If he's Jacksonville's tight end, first or second team, they don't have any tight ends. One other NFL question, and this concerns the Cowboys. And I look at this roster, and what Jerry Jones and Steven did in the draft was actually, I thought, pretty good. And I think he's getting better at drafting players and not using his ego to draft them, which is a good thing. But to me, the season and the number of wins comes down to Ezekiel Elliott, because when he has the desire to be, he is the best running back in the NFL. And a lot of people, and I am included in this, a lot of people question his work ethic and his dedication and his care about how much he wants to win and wants to be a winner and wants to play the game and wants to shine on Sundays. And I look at every position on this team offensively. The offensive line still has some youth there. But if Ezekiel Elliott can have a dominating year like he did in his first year in the NFL, I think the Cowboys are as good as at least any team in the NFC East and probably a top 5 team in all of football. If he decides to take the year off, like he has in many seasons, they're still going to be stuck in mediocrity. How would you rate that thought? Saw that.
Well, in that video you mentioned, Paul, a lot of people also commented about how in shape he looked, I guess, compared to last year when his stomach seemed to grow a little bit. And it wasn't just because of the tattoo that said "feed me" that he placed there. Do you think he looks in shape? Like if he were to put in that effort, that he could cause some damage for opposing defenses this year?
Well, there were times last year where Tony Pollard was better than Ezekiel Elliott, and I've always said this about the Cowboys when Elliott was in his prime. 3rd down and 2 in the NFL for 99% of the teams is a passing down. And when the Cowboys were in their prime, it was an 80% running down. And when it's 3rd and 2 and you say, I'm going to run Ezekiel Elliott right at you, I double dare you to stop me, and teams couldn't. That's why they were as good as they were when they won 13 games his freshman year, his rookie year.
Want to pause real quick right here to get our listeners the next keyword. We do this 12 times a day. It's your opportunity to win $1,000. All you got to do is take that keyword, head over to ticket760.com or am1300thezone.com. The box will automatically pop up for you. So all you got to do is put in that keyword for your shot to win $1,000. Here it is. There it is. Once again, that keyword, head over to one of these station websites and pop that in for your chance at $1,000. All right, Paul, you made me feel all warm and tingly inside when you said you think the Cowboys can win that opening game against the Bucks. I love that for two reasons. A, because I'm a delusional Cowboys fan who goes into every season thinking it is our year to win the Super Bowl. And because I come in so high, I go very, very low when they end up losing that first game or even the second game of the season. And also, I just don't have a thing for Tom Brady, and I hate that he took to Instagram and quoted America's team. So I need them to get this W. But an interesting season this year because we've got 17 games, which means the Cowboys cannot go their typical 8-8. What is the record that you have in your mind right now that we have the schedule in front of us?
When you look at the NFL, and you touched on this at the beginning of our NFL conversation in this segment, they have it figured out. I think even more so than the NBA, which used to have it figured out a lot, and I think does to some extent. Certainly has it figured out more than Major League Baseball. They're always doing something. It seems like every week of the year to whet your appetite for the NFL. Colin Cowherd talked about this the other day. The Super Bowl is in February now, because that's a rating sweeps month, and the networks want it there because they get credit for it. And then in March, you've got the combine, and in April, you've got draft coverage all the way up to the draft, and you have a primetime night for your schedule, and then you'll have OTAs for those that are going to do it this year, and then you'll have the Hall of Fame game. So every week, they're doing something to keep their league in the spotlight, even though the regular season only lasts 18 weeks and you play 17 games.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it all really started with the draft last year, and we were pretty much inside his home, watching him, and it really humanized him, I think, because that's just not his comfort zone to always be in front of the camera like that. And and then he brought the chair out this year at the draft and had fun with that. And I think some of his rulings at times obviously upset fans, especially if you're a Cowboys fan, and Zeke getting suspended for 6 games. Those kinds of things. And again, he's in a position of power, and people always like to tear people down, whether they're good or bad at their job in that position.
Well, I think every commissioner has done relatively well, baseball aside, and it pains me to say that because Major League Baseball is something I listen to or watch a baseball game almost every night during the season, and I'm a huge fan of the game. I don't really care who's playing. I like the intricacies of baseball. The problem with baseball is not the commissioner's fault to a certain extent, but to a certain extent it is because he's doing pretty much nothing. But I think Adam Silver's been terrific as an NBA commissioner, and Roger Goodell has been terrific. And yet every time that they go in front of a stage, somebody boos them, mainly because he had to make a difficult decision to discipline a player that needed to be disciplined. And so I look at both Goodell and Adam Silver as good a commissioners as we've had in our sports leagues. Oh, yeah.
Coach A. Paul Alexander joining us on a Friday. Thank you so much for your insight and your realism, keeping it real as you always do. 10-7, 11-6. I think I'd be okay with that as a Cowboys fan. Probably good enough to win.
But I agree with you. That's weird.
There. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Paul.
That's weird that it doesn't add up to an even number. Take care.
Have a good one, Paul. All right, coming up, we've got sports history, sports birthdays, and a salty shakedown. Stick with us. It's the Chris Duel Show on Ticket 760 and AM 1300 The Zone.
Be right back.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to fix it, but I'm pretty sure it's out of San Antonio because that's where our audio goes through. And without being there, I can't do anything.
So I do the sports history stuff, and you do the shakedown.
Yeah, if you'd like. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
And if you have more to add to the birthdays and the history, those
Okay.
are some of the big ones I found this morning.
Back in action on the Chris Duel Show on this Friday morning, along with Andy Everett. And Andy, it is time to go back in time on this day in sports history.
Here we go. 1918. Sunday baseball is made legal in Washington, D.C. You know, there are a lot of things that we take for granted that were not allowed back in the day. Obviously, lights happened to create night games, I guess, in the 40s and 50s. And the Negro Leagues actually would bring in portable lights before that. But the idea that you could not play a baseball game on Sunday in Washington, D.C. prior to 1918, that just doesn't make sense to us anymore because we always play on the weekends.
Well, and I wonder if if other people were playing, if there was a team there and they traveled outside of DC to play, could they play on Sundays?
I assume Major League Baseball played games in other cities. Maybe there were some other cities too that didn't do that. Now, like, for example, Brigham Young does not play any athletic events on Sunday. And that's part of
the tournament this year, right?
Yeah. And when the NCAA seeds Brigham Young, they have to play in that Thursday-Saturday round because they can't play on Sundays or won't play on Sundays. So that's the baseball on Sunday was not allowed until 103 years ago. 1972, Willie Mays went back to New York to play for the Mets, and he hit a game-winning homer to beat his former team, the San Francisco Giants. I wish I would have gotten to see Willie Mays play when he was younger. I don't know that baseball has ever had a player that had all the tools that he did to be as sharp as they were. He could run, he could hit, he could defend. He did it all. I did get to see him play in person in 1972. The first Major League Baseball game I attended was at Dodger Stadium, and he was playing for the Mets and starting in center field. He wasn't the same Willie Mays. His career was about to end a couple of years later, but I did at least get to see him play one game.
I feel though, like I agree, he was probably much more entertaining to watch earlier in his career. But for your first game against your former team and your first game with your new team to knock a homer to win the game, that's got to be a pretty sweet feeling. Whether or not he had any disdain for the Giants at that time or not.
2018, the U.S. Supreme Court strikes down a federal law banning sports gambling in most states. This still has a lot of controversy. It's no longer against the law federally for a state to have legalized sports gambling. Many states have enacted them. There's places where you can go legally bet on games. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, Texas is not one of them. I do not bet on games. I did once when I was in college. I lost $77 in one weekend, and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not good enough to pick the games.
Just the one time.
It only took me once.
Did you go somewhere to do it?
Like, no, there was a bookie on our floor in the dorm, and he was pretty heavily involved with it too. And he would basically you could the minimum bet was $10, which you bet 11 to win 10. And I was a freshman in college, so that was 1982. And I was like, yeah, and I would, throughout the season, I'd bet $10 on this game or $10 on that game. Nothing ever huge, but he was basically the bookie for the dorm. And he ran it out of his dorm room. And then I think he had somebody in another city that he was laying bets off on if it got too crazy for him. But no, I picked there was 7 New Year's Day bowl games on New Year's Day 1983, and before we left for the Christmas break, I gave him $77, and I said, I'll call you and tell you who I want to bet on, and I picked 7 games on New Year's Day 1983 and lost all 7 of them.
Oh no!
And I was like, so when he comes back, he says, "You want any action on the playoffs?" I'm done. I'm done. I'm not doing that ever again. And other than an annual OU Texas bet with 3 people in the office, that's the extent of my sports gambling. But I do think Texas needs to make this legal. I think there's way too many people that are into it. I think it creates more interest in the sport than anything else. And the fact that gambling in fantasy football, I think, is what's made the NFL and to some extent college football be as popular as it is.
Yeah, I have not gambled, but I might stick my toe in the water if it became legal in Texas just to see.
Well,
I'm too competitive to where that if I feel like if I were to do it the first time and win, that then I'd be all in, and that wouldn't be great.
I don't know how other people feel this way. When I go, I've been to Vegas twice. I've been to the Mohegan Sun in Connecticut 2 or 3 times. A couple of the Louisiana casinos a couple of times, and I've won and I've lost, and I'll do that occasionally. I'll bet on horse races at Retama, once every 3 years or something like that when I'm in the mood for that. But for me, there is no more desperate feeling than when you lose. And the wins, as euphoric as they may be, never offset the loss. I'm one that hates losing more than I enjoy winning.
Yes. And on top of my cheapness, not a good combination.
Yeah. So, I win. I'm like, well, I was supposed to win. And then the depression level when you lose is way too low, and so I thought that when Retama Park opened, I think in '94 or '95, and I lived in the area of Retama Park. I was 2 miles from the track. I'll go all the time because I really enjoy horse racing and I like to watch the races. But I went once a year during the Kentucky Derby, and if I won, I doubled that down in the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes. And then I would go out to the Retama and take $80 with me or $100 once a year and see if I could win some of it on just the regular card out there. But I hardly ever win. And if there were casinos and sports betting parlors in Texas, I don't think I'd ever go. But I don't think we should keep it from those who want to do it because they're doing it anyway.
I like I said, I might have to dabble but not hardcore, just like a little bit.
Yeah.
Just
Well, it's a lot of people can't stop when it's when they get carried away with it. Well, I lost $50 this weekend. I'll bet 50 this next weekend. I'll get it back. Well, now I'm betting 100. Now I'm going to bet 200. Then all of a sudden it gets into a little bit of an issue. But no, this is what's made college sports and pro sports to a certain extent. And I quit playing fantasy football mainly because I don't care about it enough to sit there and field a football team every weekend. The last year I did it was, I think, 2015 or 16. And I think it was the third or fourth season in a row where I finished last in the league. And I went to the portal to look at my team on Sunday afternoon and see how they were doing. It was like 3:30 on a Sunday afternoon, and I had 6 inactive players.
Oops.
So I was like,
lineup.
I just forgot to go check the lineup that morning or the night before because I didn't care.
Well, there you have it, sports history. Andy, you got some sports birthdays for us today?
Well, we do. Let's go to Gronk. He's only 32 years old. His body's probably 132 years old, but he's 32 years old today.
He's probably like a Terminator at this point.
Yeah, it might be.
So much metal in him.
Clay Matthews, he turns 36, born back in 1985. And Jeff Heath, he turns 30 today. He's the youngest of the bunch, born on this day in 1991.
I wouldn't mind the Cowboys bringing him back in. He seems cheap at this point after being by the Raiders pretty recently.
You can get value for him there.
Yeah, there's also a rumor now that Sherman is actually interested in going to the Cowboys. I don't know if we can afford him, but I'd take him if he was.
Well, as long as you can, the offense is set right now. You got to get defense, and if you can make the defense great, then the Cowboys should be a contender next year.
All right, there we have it. Sports birthdays for today. So let's get into it now. It's today's Salty Shakedown. All right, Hook'em fans, we got some news on the basketball front yesterday. Chris Beard has brought in a lot of players. He said goodbye to a couple players, and now he's saying goodbye to another one. Greg Brown has decided to be a true one and done, as we all thought he would be, but he has officially announced via his personal Instagram page that he is heading to the NBA draft, as well as signed with BDA Sports, which means no, he cannot return to campus should he go undrafted, but most think he will still be a lottery pick. He played 24 games. He started 24 games this season, played in 26, averaged 9.3 points, as well as 6.2 rebounds this season. Pretty good. I think he had a lot of room to grow. I don't think he was developed as much as he would have liked to have been under Shaka Smart and this Texas basketball season he had last year. Of course, blame that on COVID, blame that on whatever. Obviously, Shaka Smart's no longer there, so maybe that also has part of his decision to, in fact, be a one and done like he always thought he would. And you remember when Texas signed him, and it was a huge deal because he was going to make money if he went to the G League.
Right.
And he chose not to go. I wonder if he looks back on that decision, and I don't know if he'd call it a mistake, because I don't think it's a mistake when you get to go to a university like Texas because of the education and all the other things that come with it. But I don't think he performed the way he felt like he was going to perform this year.
I think any basketball player who is determining out of high school whether they should go to the G League or college basketball, if they're playing for a marquee league, in a marquee league with a marquee team, and Texas qualifies as that, they should go to college. And here's the reason why. Yeah, they're not going to go to class. They're going to take 4 easy classes and get their 12 hours, and then they're going to drop them all by the time they get to the tournament and then go to the pros. So, but here's the deal. The University of Texas is going to be on ESPN 25 times in a season, in a normal season. And North Carolina is going to be on almost every game. And the platform that they're going to provide you is going to elevate your draft status far more than the G League will, because no one's watching. Now, the NBA scouts know who you are, but NBA scouts and general managers often have to sell you to an owner, because an owner has to sell you to the public and to be able to sell tickets and merch. And if there's a borderline choice for you to pick, that owner is often going to want you to pick the guy that he can sell more than the guy that you know as a scout is the better player. So Greg Brown could have gone to the G League, been the best player in the G League, but the owner may not have even paid attention to him, even though the GM says this is the guy we should draft. The owner is going to say, well, I like that guy at Memphis or that guy at North Carolina because I saw him play college basketball.
Texas certainly a great school to head to if you want to be marketed for a professional career later on, or even get paid while you're in college, because of course that is now an upcoming opportunity for athletes. So maybe, some who thought they would go to the G League might go to college instead. All right, my second story today is about soccer, because I found this to be absolutely crazy. Manchester United versus Liverpool. They had a game, one got canceled. So they had another game scheduled, and fans are still very upset. Manchester United fans still very upset with the Glazer family for their involvement in what was going to be the Super League. So upset, in fact, that they're trying to get games postponed and canceled. And Liverpool, knowing this, sent out a decoy bus to the stadium the other day. They sent their red logoed bus. They sent it on one path, while the team was actually in a blacked out bus with no logos on it that went to the stadium. The decoy van was stopped by a couple of fans in the street in an attempt to not let the players get to the stadium. Of course, it ended up being a decoy, so it wasn't a big issue. Manchester players were actually asked to get to the stadium much earlier than they typically would, so they could avoid all of the commotion and the nonsense. I think this is absolutely, we know soccer fans are so passionate, probably the most passionate in the world, especially over in Europe, and for teams as legendary as Liverpool and Manchester United and all the other big names that we've come to know. But something like this just blows my, two cars came and then blocked this van from getting to where it needed to go, only to find out that it was a decoy. The fact that they even released a decoy van just blows my mind. It's something out of a movie. Have you ever heard of anything like this? Have the Spurs ever had to use a decoy van because of the pandemonium during the time of their championship run, that there were just too many fans in the way? They needed a decoy van to go first.
I don't know about that, but I do know there was one time the Spurs were staying in a hotel across the street from Madison Square Garden. Literally, you could walk across the street. But because they couldn't get across the street without fans just not letting them get to the arena, they had to go get in the bus and take the bus around to the loading dock so they could get in the building there, because there was just too many people camped out that would want autographs for the 300 yards it takes to walk across the street.
Fans are passionate people, but I would not want to be on the other side of an argument with any fans of Manchester United or Liverpool. It seems dangerous at times. It really does. All right. Finally, today, a little bit of Tom Brady news, as obviously that schedule release. We've been focused pretty hard on that Cowboys-Bucks matchup, but Tom Brady will be heading home to Gillette Stadium to play the Patriots October 3rd. That is going to be a Sunday night game, kickoff at 7:20 Central Time. And it's currently the most popular game on the secondhand ticket market, because tickets are going for as much as $8,800, Andy. That is quite a price to pay to see Tom Brady come back to Gillette and probably beat the Patriots, I would think, at least if they're looking anything like they looked like last year. Interestingly enough, the next game in the secondhand market with the most money coming in for that is that Ravens-Raiders Monday night opener, the first game where fans will be allowed to check out that new stadium in Las Vegas. I'm surprised the Cowboys-Bucks game isn't on the list, just because it is the season opener.
Yeah.
It's against the Cowboys, and it's the reigning champions. I don't know if maybe that just has to do with location, and that it's Tampa and it's Florida, and maybe they're still just not as into it as maybe another team would be.
If I had season tickets to the Patriots and somebody offered me $18,000 for 2 tickets to the game, they're for sale now. that would be a no-brainer. Yes, you can have them.
Well, and even the cheapest seats are going for $1,400.
Yeah, you can have those too.
That too. Listen, when LSU came to town a couple years ago, I was able to, because we're season ticket holders, we were able to get a couple extra seats, and then we went on the second, redistribute market that is certified by Texas. It's the one you go to. I believe it was StubHub. And I sold the extra tickets that we bought. And I think I doubled my
Absolutely.
income there with that. So
You paid for the ones you
there's
got.
the demand for it. Why not? I
Absolutely.
will comfortably sit and watch that game at the 50-yard line in the comfort of my own home, but something definitely to keep an eye on, because again, that game is October 3rd. So depending on how the Bucks and the Patriots play leading up to that game, we could see that price skyrocket even more, or just take a complete nosedive. Say unfortunately Brady gets hurt, whatever, he's not going to play. Those people who bought those tickets for that much are going to be wishing they had not. All right, there concludes today's Salty Shakedown. Andy, we've got James Allen coming up of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, also a guy who knows Jerry Jones pretty well. Did you catch the Cowboys schedule release video yesterday?
I didn't see the video. I did see who they're playing, and I looked at their schedule, but I did not see their video.
Any other games stand out to you aside from that season opener and the Raiders on Thanksgiving, which is always a fun game on Thanksgiving?
Well, I don't think the NFC East is still very good. I don't think any of the other three teams really improved themselves. The Giants should be better if Barkley comes back and is able to play at 95% of what he was with the knee injury. But I think the Cowboys should be one of the favorites to win the East. But Dak's got to stay healthy, and Elliott's got to be Elliott, and the wide receivers I think are living up to their expectations, and the offensive line. Hopefully, some of the guys that they drafted can come in there and fill the holes they need. But I think the offense is fine. It's how well the defense is going to be, and those matchups against their divisional opponents are critical. You need to go 5-1 at least against them, and if you do that, I think you're going to win the NFC East and make the playoffs.
So who's the biggest threat to the Cowboys in the NFC East at this moment, you think?
If Barkley's healthy, I would say the Giants, because I think they have I'm not sold on what Washington did last year. They basically backed into the division, 7-9? And Philadelphia is a mess, and that it's pretty much at almost every position they have. So I think the Giants, if they can say, that's why I think the Cowboys have the inside track here. I think going into the season, they're in the best shape of all those four teams in that division.
We'll get into it with James Allen next here on the Chris Duel Show. Keep it tuned in, AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760.
Mhm.
Thank you. Hour number 3 of the Chris Duel show. Shannon Salty Sweeney along with Andy Everett on this Friday morning. Andy, we've talked a lot of NFL. We're going to continue talking the NFL because, as we know, it pulls on our heartstrings. We can't get away from it, even if we tried.
It's
They
now
do things
America's
like release
pastime.
schedules and do it in fashion. So that's why we've got our man James Allen, the only Aggie I have in my phone that I
The
trust.
only one, huh?
I've got other Aggies in my phones. I don't know if I trust them as much as I trust Mr. James Allen. But James, how are you doing this morning? Thank you for joining us. Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
We don't speak of it. We don't speak of that here. But while we are on that well, I wanted to, while we're on it, Jimbo made some headlines earlier in the week by when he was talking about Texas A&M and Alabama, saying he would kick their ass. And then, funny enough, Mr. Saban responded with, "In golf?" I love it. I think it's fantastic. I don't know the level of seriousness in which either side was speaking on. Obviously, A&M wants to go beat Alabama. Everyone does. But I don't know if he meant it as something to be harsh or just kind of funny, and that's how he chose to say it. I loved Saban's response. I think that was incredible. What was your takeaway and what you know about this team now, the likelihood that they will go and beat Alabama's a double S?
Here's my thought on this. Jimbo should feel confident that he can beat Alabama, because if he doesn't feel like he can, then his players can't. And I think somebody asked him the question, are we going to have to wait for Saban to retire in order to have a chance to beat them? And he said, we'd like to beat their ass while he's there, or we're going to. But I heard a comment from him on an excerpt of his radio show a couple years ago. And he basically said along the lines, we've got to get better players. For too long, Texas A&M is settled for players that Baylor, and no disrespect to Baylor or Texas Tech or Oklahoma State or Kansas State want. We got to go get players that OU, Texas, Alabama, Auburn, and LSU want, or we're not going to beat them. And I think he's almost got that roster there. Now, it's going to be interesting to see who succeeds Kellen Mond at quarterback, but I think he's got the pieces of the puzzle in place to be a dominant top 10 team and to actually be able to compete and beat the likes of LSU, Alabama, and Auburn.
Talking to James Allen of the Pro Football Hall of James. And yesterday, the CDC lifted the guidelines on wearing masks if you're vaccinated. I'm wondering if you know anything yet about how that new rule might affect the upcoming celebrations up there in Canton.
When you look at the upcoming season, and we're basically 15 weeks away from football starting on the college level and 15 and a half or so for the NFL. So about 115 days, 112, 115 days for the things to happen. There's a lot of schools and there's a lot of leagues and teams that have said we're going to be at 100% capacity come the fall. I'm just wondering how prepared leagues are that if they are allowed to open to that number or to whatever higher number than we did last year, have they talked to their season ticket holders? Have they talked to their fan base and asked them, are you going to come? Because I think in every group of people, there's going to be some that even if the CDC and Dr. Fauci and whoever else is their oracle is they're going to be apprehensive to actually go out and be amongst around other people.
Well, and speaking of tickets, we were talking earlier about when Brady goes back to Gillette Stadium to face the Patriots with his new team. Tickets are already going for over $8,000, almost $9,000, and so I guess the demand has to be there if those prices are going that high. Now, the Cowboys were one of the teams that had the most people in the stands last year. Are we thinking Jerry will be the one to say first that, hey, we're going to go to 100%? He seems like he'd be that guy.
You look at, speaking of Jerry, I thought he and Steven and the Cowboy brass did a phenomenal job with their draft. And Jerry's been criticized over the years for going after the sizzle guy and not the guy that can actually help his team. But this year, I thought he hit a pretty good home run with the picks that he made and the maneuvering he did in the draft.
Well, you talk about Dak and they released some hype videos prior to that Dak signing, and so they left out Dak, and people were very fearful that maybe they wouldn't get the deal done. Of course, they ended up getting that deal done, and Dak very handsomely paid as he just made the Forbes list for highest paid athlete of the year, coming in at that number 4 slot. Now, the Cowboys released a pretty awesome video for their schedule release day. I'm hoping you've seen it because Dak made an appearance, Ezekiel Elliott made an appearance. Posty, aka the Postman, hand delivered the schedule to Jerry Jones, who found a way to put himself in most of that video where he donned some Cowboys bling. He had on all of his rings. He was playing beer pong. And then he was tossing out, I guess, what were little schedule cards. Did you see this video? I mean, we don't get to see a lot of Jerry's personality. I mean, he tried to display it when he can. But something like this, I love the humanization of him in this video.
Mm-hmm. I've done shows over the years and been critical of Jerry Jones in this respect, in that if he would have had more football people around him to make football decisions, they would have been more successful. But I think he wants to win a Super Bowl and say, I'm the one that won it. But that aside, I think when Jerry Jones's legacy is written, you talked about his marketing skills. And I remember an interview that was done on the Cowboy Network years ago with the late Joe Avizano. And Joe made the point. He said, people don't understand who Jerry Jones is. Jerry Jones goes to bed about midnight. He sleeps for about 3.5 or 4 hours. He wakes up at 4:30 in the morning and goes, what can I sell you today? What can I do to make money for this team and for my employees and my players? And every day that motor is running for 20 hours trying to figure out exactly what he's going to do to enhance things. And I think every player in the league owes a debt of gratitude to Jerry Jones, from the respect that him being on those TV committees and him leading the charge with not only Goodell, but Tagliabue and other commissioners, this is where this league has to become, because the NFL is now a TV show. And it's the most successful TV show in the history of TV, and everybody's gotten rich off of it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Finally today, James, want to get your way too early prediction now that we know the schedule, the order in which the games will be played for the Cowboys. 17-game season this year, so we can't go 8-8. Can't do it. What's
Well, you
your
could go
record for the
8-8-1.
Cowboys at the end of this season?
You could be 8-8-1.
That would be something they'd do. No, 17-0. 17-0, starting with game 1 against the Bucs and Brady. I want to go to the Super Bowl if they go 17-0. That's what I want, because we'd be going to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. Maybe we can knock it down to, like, I don't know, like 11-6 or something. Maybe we can still make that happen. James Allen of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, thank you so very much for joining us this morning. We always enjoyed the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gold star, Andy. Gold star.
There you go.
Congratulations on that one. Fantastic conversation, as always, with Mr. James Allen. When we return, we'll wrap things up. We'll take a look at our poll question, preview the sports weekend, talk that Jordan Spieth putt that happened yesterday. It was pretty incredible, as well as some NBA news on the TNT side, on the broadcasting side. Broke this morning. Pretty interesting there. We'll get into it with Andy Everett. I'm Shannon Sweeney. This is the Chris Duel Show on AM 1300 The Zone and Ticket 760.
Dean, I am not a Spurs fan. So whatever benefits the Mavericks is what I'm here for. I think it's the Spurs fan a better draft pick, but as Andy talked about earlier, no one's going to go out there and not compete. They can use it as a live practice in order to work on things. But yeah, and if you're going to tank, you would have started tanking way earlier.
Yeah, the Spurs would be better off in the lottery, but they're not going to lose on purpose.
Closing out the Chris Duel show on a Friday, heading into the weekend. Shannon Salty Sweeney here, along with Andy Everett. Andy, during the break, we had some questions about the Spurs, whether or not it might be better for them to just slide out after this play-in game, or if they really want to push it and make a run. Either way, even if they did try their hardest, put all their might behind it, I don't see them getting past round one if they were to get into the playoffs. Most people on our poll today seem to think that they're not even going to make it into that round one, that they will be done after this play-in game, which right now it's looking like they will face the Grizzlies. Are you of that same belief?
Well, theoretically, the Spurs would be better off if you want to know what's best for the long-term future of the franchise to get a lottery pick, because then you have at least a mathematical shot at getting one of the top 3 picks. Now, that doesn't mean the odds are against you, but you have a chance. And to be able to get a player of that magnitude and hope you can keep him for longer than 4 years would be beneficial to the long-range future of the Spurs. But the Spurs, especially anytime and I think this goes from pretty much any NBA coach, they're going to be hyper competitive, and they're not going to lose to Memphis on purpose to get into the lottery on the chance that they may get a pick. So I think you'll see them play hard. I think you'll see them playing to win. But this roster is not a great playoff roster, and it's not a great regular season roster. They're pretty much what they are, and until they get more better players and more impact players, that's where they're going to be for the foreseeable future.
C's to get degrees, I say threes to get rings in the NBA. The Spurs, of course, will take on the Suns Saturday and Sunday. Both of those games will tip at 1 o'clock, which is great for Spurs fans who want to see Tim Duncan get into the Hall of Fame. That broadcast begins at 6:30 tomorrow night. Other sports in the area, Austin FC taking on LA Galaxy tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Central Time, and Texas softball taking on a top 10 ranked Oklahoma State. Texas baseball is off for the weekend. They will not play again until the 18th when they take on the Rice Owls. Some interesting news that seemed to break this morning, Andy. You just sent me a link to it. Chris Webber parting ways with TNT. Of course, he's usually part of those playoff broadcasts. An interesting time here to part right before we get into the playoffs. What do you think the issue is on either side, and why this separation happened, and why did it happen right now?
Well, most of the time, issues like this come down to one thing, and that's money. I will say this about Chris Webber. When he first started broadcasting with TNT, he wasn't very good, and he has developed into a really good analyst. Now, I'm not a big fan of when TNT or ESPN, either one, goes players only, because I think there needs to be a professional broadcaster there to lead the show. Mm-hmm. And Marv Albert and Kevin Harlan and Brian Anderson and Ian Eagle, who are pretty much the core four, if you will, of TNT's basketball coverage, are all excellent at what they do as broadcasters. And I think they've brought along a lot of their analysts, including Chris Webber. And I don't know this to be the case, but if it is about money, understand one thing. When when professional athletes of any kind leave their world and go into the real world, and they see what other people make, even though I'm guessing they're paying Chris Webber probably $10,000 a game or more, he was probably making $70,000 a game to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, we're going to pay you. We're going to have you do 40 broadcasts this year, and you're going to get paid $400,000. Well, I want 700, or I want 1.5 million. Well, that's not what the budgets allow you to do. And athletes sometimes look at what other people make that are in the real workforce and don't understand the economics. Professional athletes are entertainers. They're no different than movie stars or actors and actresses on a TV show that get paid millions of dollars. But those who work around them usually don't make that much, and that's kind of a culture shock sometimes to athletes. And I'm guessing Chris Webber thought he was worth more than TNT wants to pay, and they never could get together on the terms, and they agreed now to part ways because maybe TNT said, we're not going to bring you back next year, or Chris Webber was trying to find a role for himself. I don't know. If he wants to broadcast, I'm sure ESPN or NBA TV will pick him up, probably at a lower rate. If he wants to do something else, I'm sure he's got a lot of money saved in the bank and opportunities to do whatever it is he wants to do for a long time.
I always loved about Kobe. He talked about, he obviously made a ton of money playing basketball, but he realized that wasn't going to be an income that came in for forever. And in order to continue to live the lifestyle he was living while playing basketball, he needed to take on those other business ventures to have that income once his time playing basketball ended. And so for Chris Webber, you're right. I don't know what he'll do. There's a good chance someone will at least try to hire him because, as you said, he did greatly improve in his broadcast time and his skills. And I agree. I think it's fine when you bring a player in because they definitely bring a certain perspective that someone who's just a broadcaster can't. But also, there's broadcasters for a reason. It's not just getting up and talking about a game you once played.
Yeah, I look at Jalen Rose as another example who wasn't very good when he was first doing sidelines on the NBA broadcast. And now he's got a very successful television talk show and is a completely different person than he was 10 or 15 years ago when he started that. But I think guys like him understand that doing this is no different than playing basketball. It's about reps, and you've got to go in the gym and shoot 500 shots a day to become a better shooter. And the more times you broadcast or the more times you do a show or you do a game or whatever, the better you get at it, especially if you have the talent coaches that those networks have at their services to educate those players that become broadcasters on how to do it correctly.
Andy, we've got you here, so we've got to talk a little bit more on the golf side. Jordan Spieth yesterday hit a 55-footer for an amazing eagle. I believe it's at the AT&T Byron Nelson. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. We are just a week away from the PGA Championship. Is he in the right space here? I mean, he's looking really good. He's always been known for his putting skills, but that 55-footer was something else.
Well, I think Jordan Spieth makes more long putts than any golfer since at least Tiger, if not even in before him. And he's considered, I think, one of the best putters in the history of the game, and he's only been a pro for 10 years. I'm not surprised that he does it because he seems to do that a lot. The shot that I saw yesterday that I thought was miraculous was the 246-yard hybrid shot from the cabbage where he knocked it on the green and hit it to about 12 feet, missed the putt for eagle and tapped in for birdie. I do think he's in the right place for the PGA Championship week next week at Kiowa Island. I've heard they're going to set up that golf course extraordinarily long, which doesn't necessarily favor him, although he hits it further than he used to. But his equalizer is his putter. And when he is on fire with that, that's why he won the majors that he's won and the tournaments that he's won. And to think about this too, he caught COVID shortly after the Masters and hasn't played the last 3 weeks, and was going to play in Tampa 2 weeks ago, but couldn't because of the COVID issue, and then decided to take Wells Fargo off last week to completely recover. And now he's COVID free and back on the tour. But I thought he would be a little rusty, maybe a little tired, maybe a little fatigued, but he didn't seem to be that way yesterday.
Now, it's interesting when you said that, it sparked a question when you talked about how the course next week, they're probably going to set it up to be a little long. Obviously, courses are limited by how long they can make holes, but obviously where you end up putting the hole on the green can change things in strategy. In this era where we do have guys like Dustin Johnson and Bryson DeChambeau who are all about the long ball versus guys who just want to lay it up and make sure that they hit the green where they intend to. Is that something that course directors and people that set up these tournaments are having to think about, that maybe by making a course this way, it's catering more to one player than another? Is it going to be a marketing ploy at some point to say, well, we'd really like Bryson to shine here. He was in the news a lot last week. We'd like to keep him through the weekend. Maybe we set up the course a little long to help him stay.
No, I don't think they go that direction. I think they want the field, the golf course to play as fairly for every player in the field as possible. And if you're not a long hitter, then you're going to have to lay up on par fives and you're going to have longer shots into par fours. They're playing the Ocean Course at Kiowa Island, where they played the PGA in 2012. They played the Ryder Cup there in 1991. It's hosted a number of other big events throughout the years. And it's one of these American link style golf courses, because I don't think there's really any such thing as a true links course in the United States. The soil and the land and the sea and all that isn't the same as it is in England and Scotland and Ireland. But it's an Americanized version of links golf, where the fairways are massive and then the rough is way out of play, but it's really penal. It's knee deep. And so there isn't graduated layers of rough like there would be in a traditional golf course. And so therefore it's driving the ball. These guys are good enough. They're not going to miss a lot of fairways. So in order to give the golf course some defense, you have to make that a little bit longer, because you can't grow grass the way you want to in the wintertime in order to get that golf course in May ready for graduated rough. It's just not set. It's just a completely different type of golf course. And so the distance is going to become the measuring stick. Now, what they'll do is that the PGA of America has a game plan on how they're going to set the golf course up Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday next week. That game plan gets changed when the weather forecast comes in. This is the plan if the wind's going to blow from this direction. This is the plan if it's going to blow from a different direction. This is the plan if it's not expected to rain. This is the plan if it is expected to rain. So they'll tweak the golf course based on weather conditions to make it fair for everyone. But anytime you have a golf course that's going to play over 7,500 yards long, guys like Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson and Bryson DeChambeau are going to have a distinct advantage on a golf course where you can't grow rough. And you can have the major rough that you'll have at Kiowa Island, but you can't have the graduated stuff like you do at most on most golf courses.
Always interesting to talk to Andy Everett about the PGA and the world of golf, something I'm trying to get more involved in. Hopefully, once all this COVID stuff really does clear, I can finally learn how to hit a golf ball appropriately. Because I've been told I hold a golf club like a baseball bat, which is apparently not the way
Incorrect.
to do it. But whatever, I'll get there one day. All right, Andy, we've been doing this pretty recently on the show. We started just mentioning whatever the national day is, because there's a national day every day. Usually, there's even more than one. Today happens to be National Dance Like a Chicken Day. You know the chicken dance, right?
Absolutely.
We celebrate it on a day like today. Why? Who knows? But we do. It's also National Buttermilk Biscuit Day. So I wanted to ask you where your favorite biscuit comes from. Mine, Popeyes. I love Popeyes chicken. I love everything about Popeyes. The biscuits are grade A.
The ones at Red Lobster.
Ooh, the cheddar. They're like
the cheddar Bay biscuits. Yes.
Have you ever gone to HEB and like you can buy
Yes.
and make them at home?
I think you actually can buy them frozen and heat them in the oven.
Really? I haven't seen the frozen ones. That'd be better for me. I don't think I've ever been to a Red Lobster just because I'm not a seafood person, but I've had the biscuits at home, and so I don't. Yeah. Are they the same? Am I missing out on something?
I think they probably get them delivered frozen and heat them up in their oven at Red Lobster. No. I don't think there's a biscuit guy in the back room making them from scratch. So
that's disappointing. That's not like Texas Roadhouse with the rolls. Those are.
Yes.
I mean, I'd go there for bread.
Yes. And then you fill up on bread and then you're stuffed by the time the meal gets there.
That's how they get you. And they get me every single time. All right, everyone, make sure you go out and butter your biscuits and grab biscuits and just.
Yeah, and Texas Roadhouse also fills you up with peanuts before you get to the bread.
I wonder, are peanuts still going to be a thing? You know,
because
they're just like buckets of peanuts in the front that you just grab by the handfuls.
Yeah, you don't eat the shells; you're eating the nuts inside them.
No, but still, the COVIDs. I feel like the COVIDs is going to take that out.
Maybe they'll have them prepackaged in bags for you.
I live pretty close to one, and they do a good curbside service. So I haven't been in. I've only ever pulled up to the back door to grab my food.
See what?
Can I get extra rolls, please?
When I go to a baseball game, peanuts are mandatory. That's and I'm going to make a mess. I don't like Cracker Jacks.
Like the song says.
Yeah, but peanuts, the shell peanuts are mandatory for me. I don't eat hot dogs. I don't eat the nasty nachos at a baseball game. I'm not eating sushi at a baseball stadium, but I'm going to eat peanuts, and I'm going to make a big mess in the floor in front of me because the shells are going to go everywhere, and hopefully there's nobody near me that's allergic to peanuts. But that's my go-to thing at a baseball game. So. Yeah, I mean, if Texas Roadhouse has to put them in a paper bag and hand them to me, that's fine. But you got to provide peanuts.
And he's demanding peanuts.
Yeah,
that's fair. I wonder now if there's kids that like just avoid baseball games because they can't handle peanuts and you can't control the peanut eaters around you. That's interesting. I went to opening day last week and I didn't eat anything. I would just drink tequila the entire time, and it was fantastic.
Well, if somebody near me said, I'm allergic to peanuts, can you not? I wouldn't. And now airplanes no longer serve peanuts. Southwest Airlines used to serve peanuts all the time, but there's too many people with peanut allergies. And so I'll buy my own peanuts sometimes before I go, but I always ask the person sitting next to me, are you allergic to peanuts? Because I'm not going to open these if you are. I don't want you to go into anaphylactic shock while we're here on the airplane. So I am cognizant of the people that may not be able to handle that.
Well, it's nice that you care. And it's nice that you cared enough to join me this morning. Again, Andy, I always enjoy the conversation. I know getting up this early in the morning is not easy, but you always bring it. So thank you very much for joining me.
So very much thank you. And I'll see you next time whenever Chris decides to take the day off.
And thank you to Sam Fries, who held it down in San Antonio all morning. If you missed any piece of the show today, yesterday, the day before, even weeks ago, it's all there for you on the iHeartRadio app. Just look up the Chris Duel Show. It's all broken down hour by hour, too. So if you missed 1 hour, it's easy to find. Go check it out. It's been the Chris Duel Show, AM 13 on the Zone, and Ticket 760. We'll see you Monday when we'll do it all over again. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thanks, Andy.
Take care.